Hey there, party people. Welcome to another NRW video. I'm your host with the most, Mr. David Estacado, and I'm here with my buddy from another nutty, Mr. the one and only
Rob the Movie Guy. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here. It has been a long time, as David and I have been MIA here. We do apologize. Stuff happens, but we're back in action here, and we are officially going to finish our review for the Terminator series. Now, it's a little late, of course.
It's been a while.
It's beyond late at this point. It's unexcusable at this point, I would have to say, because really, what excuse do we have? Life. That's what happens. But anyway.
But it is. We finally get the video out here. We get to talk about Terminator Dark Fate. It's probably going to come out in DVD in the next couple of weeks anyways, considering the box office numbers here. But yeah. So we're still going to do the review. We're going to hear our thoughts about it. So before we get into it, I think
let's roll the trailer.
Do it.
Talk fast.
You first.
My name is Sarah Connor. August 29, 1997. It was supposed to be Judgment Day. But I changed the future. Saved 3 billion lives. Enough of a resume for you?
No. You may have changed the future, but you didn't change our fate. I know you're scared, but I'm here to protect you.
Never seen one like you before. Almost human.
I am human, just enhanced. Why do you care what happens to her?
Because I was her.
Sarah!
I can see you're very upset. I'm going to help you protect the girl.
Nobody else is gonna die because of me! If you don't make it, everybody dies!
Expect a big pain, brother. The whole body's a weapon. Sorry.
When this is all over, I am going to kill you.
I understand.
I'll be back.
Okay, so we've heard a lot of hype about this film. Before we saw the film, we of course had heard a lot of opinions of the film prior to its release. We've had people were saying the franchise is dead, just leave it as it is. Yeah. Why bother? And then when they were talking about having Tim Miller, the director of Deadpool, to go ahead and direct this film, a lot of us were very excited because of what he had done with Deadpool and what he could potentially do with this franchise here, especially having the one and only James Cameron back to produce the film. So he had the rights back to the film. So there was a lot of things working in its favor there. And then one other thing they said that they were going to be doing is that they were going to officially make this part 3. Rather than being a continuation of all the other films, it's just going to be Terminator 2 Judgment Day, now Terminator Dark Fate, which in a lot of ways brought a lot of people's attention. Like, okay, well, maybe they can do something different this time around. And then they brought back one of the most key ingredients to the franchise, which is bringing back Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor. So there was a lot of things that they were doing through this film to help elevate the franchise back to its original roots. Of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger was back in the mix as well too, for obvious reasons. And we were all wondering what could they do to make the story better to continue the franchise. Well, apart from the things we have heard before, I have to say though, if you and I already knew that the film got a lot of hate, I think just unjustifiably because having seen the film, you and I, we both have an opinion that's pretty much very similar. That we loved the movie. We thought it was a fantastic film. It was a fun movie. Nowhere near as bad as I think a lot of the people make it seem like that it's a terrible movie. It was complete garbage. And I'm like, what were they watching? You know, were they really watching another movie for them to say that? Because they probably were looking at another film, because I can't see what they got.
Expectations. I think a lot of people's expectations were really high for the film. I know mine was. I know yours were. I enjoyed the movie for what it was, especially continuing the franchise in a kind of weird off, direction. And we'll get to that. Because to me, it's probably out of the franchise as a whole is probably, and I get it, it's probably the third best movie out of all of them. 1, 2, and this.
Yeah.
Given the situation. A lot of people may disagree. Maybe some people, for some reason, think Salvation was the better one. Some other think Regenesis. I enjoyed Regenesis for what it was. Kind of
Genesis, not Regenesis. Genesis.
Sorry, Genesis. Kind of opening that franchise, that canon out to a little bit more. Yeah. But that being said, the numbers just didn't show it. And it had so much going for it. So I'm kind of left with like, what happened?
Yeah.
Story-wise, it was kind of.
This was basically The Force Awakens. If you think about
it, yes.
They basically, and I understand the criticism there, and that's for me. It's one of the bigger criticisms that I have of the film is that they essentially took a lot of the plot elements from all the other franchises post T2, and a lot of it from T2 moving forward. They took bits and pieces from Terminator Genesis, Rise of the Machines, and a bunch of other stuff, even to some extent Salvation. And they crammed it into this one film. They were essentially trying to take the best ingredients of those films and putting into this film, and they made a whole new story, if you will.
And it kind of works.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think a lot of people are upset because of like the first few minutes, you get a little bit of that future war looking stuff. And I was really excited because I always wanted more of that future war scenario. I was kind of hoping for more lasers because every time we see the future war in the previous films, is all more
that little laser gun. Yeah, oh my god, I love that.
Man, so great.
Yeah.
But then within like the first 5 minutes, they kind of like pull something that just kind of really like. Is this a thing? They Alien 3'd us, is what they did.
So let's get into that though, because that's it's going to be
just talking.
Yeah. So we heard that Edward Furlong was going to be back as John Connor,
and I was excited.
Right, and James Cameron made that. Yes, he's going to be back, and we're all wondering to what capacity. And I knew when they said that, I was like, he's going to have a small role. And I remember thinking at one point, it wouldn't surprise me if they kill him, or if they don't kill him. They'll basically do a Luke Skywalker like they did a la Force Awakens, where he shows at the very last minute.
Great, kind of like
around
and
Hamilton gives him a gun. He's gonna be like something to that extent. That's what I was thinking they might do, which I thought would be really stupid. But no, they did the polar opposite. He's in the very beginning, and he gets killed by a T-800. Arnold, another Arnold, basically, and that's kind of where a lot of the mixed feelings I had of the film. I wasn't entirely against it. I was just a little. I didn't for the direction that they took. It was a risky one, and then as the film progressed, it kind of made sense given the direction that they took the story, which I'm interested in. Which we'll never see at this point, but I would have been very interested in seeing what direction they would have taken it because they had planned for a trilogy now. I was not happy with it, quite frankly. And then I wanted to bring up the fact, too, because there was an interview that Edward Furlong had done at a Comic-Con that he was at doing some signings. And this kid had asked him, what did you think of Dark Fate? He's like, oh, well, they smoked my ass. And I was like, oh wow, he really does not like that. He's like, and he's like, so were you actually there to shoot for the film? He's like, yeah, I was there for 1 day, and they paid me. But, you know, they put some makeup on me, put some dots and whatever. I was like, oh, so that really was John Connor, because that sequence in the beginning of the film took place, what, 97, 98, when Judgment Day was supposed to happen. And then, so that, another Terminator had come back to kill him. And then, so he said that, you know, he would have loved to have done the film, you know, continue on with the franchise and make a lot more money. And I honestly would have loved the same too for him. So they switched it around by having him appear in the beginning of the film and they kill him. I mean, when you saw that, what did you think?
I was upset. I was like, "What again? Really?" But for, like you said, for the story, it did make sense. For me, I was like, "Yo, really?" I mean, the whole point was like John Connor, but then, you know, he was like the humanity's salvation. He was the one who's gonna started the, you know, the rise against, you know, the machines and whatnot, and the rebels. Well, not the whatever the army of humans that came together. So they kind of had to go into that story, which, considering how that story started with that and then going on, it has kind of grabbed me. I'm like, all right, well, where that happened, so where are we going to go with next? And it kind of opened the door for the story.
Yeah.
It upset me, yeah, because I like it like you. I wanted to see where it was going to go with the franchise, with Edward Furlong attached and whatnot. Who knows? Maybe if they're at this point, if they even decide to do a sequel or if not, who knows? But yeah, from when it goes from there, it goes into kind of the same thing where a protector is sent back in time to protect another new savior, so to speak.
Well, know that in the beginning, because this new girl played by Mackenzie Dern, I believe, who plays Grace in the film, who goes back in time. If you see in the trailer, she's human, but she's been augmented, and she's going back to protect this young girl. And you get the impression that she is essentially another Sarah Connor who's going to give birth to a new future leader, and that's what Sarah Connor, who's back in the film, in the franchise now, under the same impression as well too. And then that's essentially the plot. Then another Terminator is called Rev 9 comes back, who has a new set of powers that they can use to replicate somebody else, and then replicate another version of themselves. To do two different things at once within the distance of one another.
Duplication power, which is kind of they didn't really just really show it off that. I mean, it was a great effect. It was awesome to see, but they didn't really explain it that well throughout the story as the movie went on.
Yeah.
And as the story goes on, you kind of realize that this isn't Judgment. Judgment Day was stopped. But because of Judgment Day was stopped, something else took over.
Right.
So it was like Legion was what the computer system that had taken over at that point. And then from there it was like the new Skynet.
Right, and that was kind of like the rehash of that. I kind of had a problem with. Well, so it's kind of an interesting take on it. And if you do a good job in telling a story like that, and with the proper, I guess, narrative on there to really to really get the people invested into it, it could work, because we've talked about it in the past before with Terminator and then Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Like, the plot should never work. It's on paper it sounds like a really ridiculous plot, but James Cameron does a great job in telling a wonderful character story. And then having the action sequences there kind of help elevate those stories there. So
really augmented and sold the story very well. I mean, they kind of did again this time around. You get some of the flashback sequences of how she became augmented, which is really cool. It had that, like you said, Rise of the Machines kind of Salvation feel to it, almost Gears of War feel to it. Especially with some of the cinematics and the action sequences involved with that. And you're gonna get a look at some of the Rev 9s and other Terminators within that new future.
Yeah, and so I mean, so the overall plot of the film, as it progressed, we were talking about how you get the first 5 minutes of that shocker, if you will, of John Connor dying in the beginning of the film, and then now you're kind of left with what happens now, and then you're forced to watch this new story unfold, and it's essentially more or less the same thing of the first two films, but
they did kind of add something else to which I kind of enjoyed, and I think the most highlight of the film was Sarah Hamilton. I mean, she's pretty much stole the movie.
Yeah.
There's still most of the scenes
as Sarah Connor.
Sarah Connor,
Yeah.
brain fart. Because as the movie goes on, you find out that Sarah Connor has been getting different pinpoints and coordinates throughout the years.
Yeah.
Where Terminators were popping up, so she'll go on and destroy these Terminators, and every time she gets the coordinates, it'd be for John. So she'll go on and on and go on until eventually she meets up with their two new protagonists and goes on from there. And I like the tension between the two, kind of have build it up between her and Grace, and her them protecting the new girl, which I can't remember her name at the moment.
Her name was Daniela.
Danny. There we go, Danny.
Yeah.
And the dynamic between the three was actually pretty fun to watch as the film progressed. They didn't really explain much about why Grace needed the medication and whatnot, because I guess her system.
They did actually. They did. If you remember, she was saying that the reason why
she's able to go in short spouts. You can't go long time.
Because they figure if you can get the Terminator right then and there, just use all of our powers to overpower them, that would be enough to take them down. And it worked to a point, and then eventually she had to take some. And the only thing I don't remember what kind of medication she had to take to kind of rebuild herself back, like insulin or whatever else.
No, but like they didn't really explain that aspect of why did that work? Why are they what's going on?
I'm sorry, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Is it the adrenaline rush? Is it their systems were failing? They didn't really get into that because there's other little things that kind of get into into as well. That really could have been used early on in the film, not later on in the film. But eventually they lead up to kind of like, we're going to back up, try to get rid of this, Terminator, and all the coordinates are the same because they were on Grace and coming out that they were coming from the Terminator who killed John in the beginning of the film.
Right.
That was the twist. I assumed this was like another Terminator that had come through that survived, or from another timeline, is what I thought. But no, it's the exact same Terminator from the beginning of the film.
And so, I mean, that was something that I figured they were going to do, because having seen the trailer and you saw Arnold Schwarzenegger come back and he's clearly a lot older, which you can't, you're going to have to make that work fit into the story of like how he's able to age throughout all these years. So they pretty much took the same plot elements of Terminator Genesis, where as he ages throughout the years, he still has his body, his robotic frame, but the body starts to age so that way he fits with the society. They don't question like, wait, you still look like the same that you did 50 years ago. What's up with that? And they kind of went into the whole scientific thing about it, which is ridiculous, but it worked for the film.
Yeah, it did. It was great the way the film. That makes sense. It makes sense. Like in order for him, kind of go blend society. But I mean, that was a cool kind of explain away, I guess.
Right, and I thought that this version of the Terminator, where they kind of took it a different direction, where he's essentially, his purpose was to kill John Connor. Once he had completed that purpose, there was nothing else for him to do. And then as time went by, he had somewhat grown a conscience through all the wiring that he's able to learn and whatever else. I mean, they kind of get into it a little bit. And so even Sarah Connor criticized him. So basically, you grew a conscience. He's like, yes, through all this, all this data that he received, and he starts developing a personality. He becomes like a drape salesman of some sort. And and there's a wonderful scene where he's talking to who was it, Grace, I think it was, in the movie. He's like, so I told this guy not to use these drapes, and then he was like, I want to use it for my kid. And I told him, no, don't use them. Use this instead. And the guy was looking at me. He said, all right. Like those little quirks about him in the story was very fitting, because he clearly has developed a personality, and he's still kind of like distant, and he's still kind of like that. Like, what's the word I want to use? He's developed an understanding of the human race, but he still has that that understanding that he is not them, he is not a human, but he has to, in order to fit in, he has to behave like one, and he's learned that throughout the years. And I thought they did a really good job. Arnold Schwarzenegger and his performance in this film, I thought was flawless, and clearly the guy is still very charismatic. If there's one thing about Arnold Schwarzenegger that you can never deny, that he's one of the most charismatic actors in this business, and at this age, he still certainly carries the film in that regard, where he has a lot of funny moments in the film which were not that were not distracting for the film. In fact, they help elevate those scenes when it came to those personality changes that you see of this character here. So I appreciated that. I'm not sure how if you felt the same way about it.
So you kind of see like, yes, he kind of grew to, he even said that he did it for Sarah Connor, for her to have a purpose.
Right.
As Clone after John, because he didn't find a purpose, so he gave her a purpose.
Himself gave him a purpose too.
Yeah, and it gave him a purpose as well to kind of continue on. He kind of, at the end of the day, kind of not really learned to regret what he did, but kind of like learned the impact of what he did.
Yeah.
And went on from there. And he kind of over the course of the film, especially near the end of the film, he kind of go like, he did it for John. And even that last line where he sacrifices himself, what he says, last thing for John.
Yeah. But that was nice. It was a very nice touch. It didn't have that impact as T2 did, but it definitely had that same intention. And I thought they did a really good job in portraying that. One thing that I kind of want to get into, which I'm surprised we didn't get into in the very beginning, was the new Terminator here, the Rev 9, played by Gabriel, I think his name Luna or Gabriel. I can't remember. Gabriel. I apologize for not knowing his name, remembering his last name. But what did you think of him as the new Terminator?
I enjoyed it. It was like he brought little things that kind of like actually really kind of like made sense for the universe. Especially changing the accent here and there. It kind of it was pretty cool. Some of the mannerisms you could tell they're kind of redo a lot of it from Mr. Patterson's Terminator. Stuff like that. Just little nuances and stuff that I picked up on that I actually enjoyed. Like there's one scene in particular where he walks into one of the offices or whatever, and someone like says something to, "Oh, you're late, but why did you bring the donuts?" And it just goes into, just killing spree into that. It was just like, okay, cool. I liked the idea of like it being able to duplicate itself, but they didn't really go too much explaining into how it worked or whatever, because apparently it could touch technology as well, or like other metals it could bring into itself or whatever. But yeah, I actually liked him. He did a good job.
Yeah, I thought so too. There's a lot of like elements of the T-1000 that I noticed. You mentioned about some little nuances of the character where, especially after that whole detention center where they kept all the immigrants there, and that all that shit went down, and he comes out, and he runs into two officers, and he's talking about his background, about military, whatever else, and he puts on that Texas accent, which I thought he did a good job in. I haven't met a few Texans that kind of feel, he actually does as far as I could tell from what I remember, a pretty authentic sounding accent. And then he has that little that remnants. It reminded me of the T-1000, where if you remember in Terminator 2, where the T-1000 goes like, "Say, that's a nice bike," and then this guy does the exact same thing. He turns around, he's like, "Say, where do you think I can get a helicopter?" Like just those little touches here and there that brings back like, oh, this is the T-1000, like those little nods to the tips of the audience there. I appreciated those little things right there. But I mean, like you said, I thought the actor did a good job in portraying this new Terminator. I thought so too. In fact, I kind of want to get into about a lot of the complaints of the film, because I read an article that Tim Miller had done about what the box office bomb that this film was, that what he thought about it and why he thought it had affected the box office returns for this film. And I think he brings up an interesting point where he said that he thought that you've had Terminator 3, which wasn't that well received, but it made a lot of money. Then you have Terminator Salvation, which again was not that well received, but in some ways made some money. Then you have Terminator Genesis, which was not well received, which I happened to saw not too long ago, and I didn't hate it as much the first time. The second time, as I saw when I saw it the first time, you and I did the T3 commentary, and I just absolutely like detest that film. I don't think it's a terrible film, but it was just like, what are you doing here? But anyways, this film, he was saying that people have come back from seeing 3 bad films in a row for the series, and then we have this film, so they're automatically have this preconceived notion that this is going to suck, and they walk in with that mindset, and they walk out. Well, yeah, it was just this is a waste of time with Sarah, because I saw a lot of reviews.
I disagree with those people. I think it's probably the best movie since the first 2.
Yes,
and it's up there. I mean, the action sequences were great. The set pieces were cool, especially the pieces up in the air with the plane coming down and everything was crazy. And going back to what you said about the actor and the Rev 9, it seemed like a legit threat. And that's what was missing from the other movies. Like they didn't seem like a legit threat like the T-1000 was, because like you get this kind of like big action sequence, so you get some kind of peace, and then like you think everything's good. Nope, but here comes another action sequence. That's what I really enjoyed about it. It's like it felt like a boss that kept coming back after a certain amount of damage, until the final boss fight at the end. I actually enjoyed that aspect of the Rev 9 and the actor playing it, because like he was like he just kept coming and wouldn't stop, just like what a Rev 9 Terminator should be.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I thought it was really, really cool. Like up to that point. Is it a perfect film? No, it's not. It really isn't. I mean, speaking about that, and you bring up Mr. Miller, it sounds like that, especially with James Cameron being attached as well. It sounded like from other interviews and other articles and stuff regarding the making of the film, how they both kind of clashed heads a lot about what kind of story they were trying to tell. James Cameron had one version of the film, Mr. Miller had another version of the film, and you can kind of see where both of those kind of mesh together in this film. You can see, this was definitely James Cameron right here, and then other parts of the movie, like, well, you could tell this is Mr. Miller, especially with the way that they kind of I guess try to make the film work with each other's kind of different version of what would happen.
Well, Tim Miller was saying that essentially James Cameron owned the rights to the film, so he had final say of what would work, what would go into the film and what not. And he was saying that initially he wanted to start with the film where humanity basically doesn't survive. Like that was going to be the first shot. Like humanity is done. And James Cameron was like, no, I want to show that humanity survives. He's like, well, we've already had that happen before in the first 2 films. Why would you want to repeat that again? How about this time we show that humanity doesn't survive, and now they have to struggle, and will they meet their fate as a result of what we saw in the beginning of the film? And he was like, no, we're not going to do that. Why would you find that interesting? That's not very interesting. This is more interesting. So. And then he also said that at the end of the day, when they were editing the film, he basically had no say in it, and it was James Cameron who was on top of the entire process and had final word. He's like, I'm not going to work with him again. I mean, we definitely clashed heads, and he was nice enough to say, hey, this is just 2 artistic people clashing heads, but next time I'm in LA, I'll buy you a beer. So obviously they still have somewhat of a cordial relationship. I mean, he's like, he emailed me this last week. So it shows you where James Cameron has come from where he started to where he is now and at this point in his life. And Tim Miller is clearly someone who's like, hey, listen, if you're going to give me the job, that means that I have a vision and you trust my vision and you don't let me have control of my vision. And he's not one of those guys that's willing to, bend over backwards just for the sake of doing it. And he was like, I'm not going to go through that again. When James Cameron brought up a point where he said, when I worked with Robert Rodriguez for Battle Angel, lead of Battle Angel, he was like, I'll do whatever you want because this script is amazing. He's like, no, make it your own. I was like, no, we'll do it the way you want. And then I'm working with Tim Miller, and it was the exact opposite. So clearly there was some friction there, and I don't know if it showcases in the film, because if anything, the film is very cohesive. There's not like you can see where they botched this and they kind of just try to patch together what they could. It was nothing like that whatsoever. It's a very solid film.
And it's very well paced. Like I agree.
Yeah, I agree. And It's unfortunate the film didn't do very well. We had this conversation before we started. I believe they should have started the film. They should have scaled back on the budget, not make it a big spectacle. Like someone a while ago had mentioned that go back to the roots of the first film, make it small because you've already had several films that were not good, that were not liked by the public. Keep it small, and then when you make your $280 million to $300 million film on a smaller budget, then you have an incentive. Okay, we've built enough interest for this franchise now. Let's bring up the budget and let's crank it up another level here. That's what they should have done. Instead, they put a nearly $200 million film on the up on the screen, and then the cost of promoting the film, which is probably another $200 million on its own. It had to make his money back and at least over $500 million, if I'm not mistaken, to break even. Didn't even come close near to that. So,
it's a shame. So hopefully, maybe it becomes one of those, after make a return later in the DVD, Blu-ray category. Who knows? We don't know. But here's hoping, because it was a good film, at least to me. Now, it wasn't perfect. No. Did it miss the spots? Yes.
Yeah.
Because yes, let's be honest, it did rehash some things. It did. I mean, there's not much you can do with the franchise, but I did like the direction it kind of went with, kind of this offshoot timeline.
Yeah.
Another, threat opens up, and it looked like a bigger, badder threat.
Yeah.
Which you could open up, and there's so many shit you could do with this franchise. You can kind of look into more of, open up that mythos into that future war, or go back in the past and kind of like the setup to Legion, and it coming out to the outcome of what it is. But what I did like is they did set the pieces around Danny, and eventually at the end where you kind of see like Danny become throughout the film the John Connor.
Yeah.
Eventually does get that, she goes out of becoming that, I don't know what I'm doing, but to being the hope of humanity, so to speak.
Yeah.
You do see that at the end of the film. And speaking of the film, what did you think of the ending? How it kind of finishes up?
Well, I'll put it like this: given the fact that there is no hope for a new film coming out after this one, if it really ends right here, it left on a good note. I thought, they kind of go back to where Grace lives as a child. In this current time that they're in, and they see that she's with her family and she's safe, and hopefully the future will not repeat to what they were expecting it down the line there. And obviously Danny has grown to be a more stronger individual with Sarah Connor along the way, and if they leave it on this note, it's a good ending, I thought, because essentially it kind of leaves not necessarily like an ambiguous ending, but more like a hopeful ending, which is what James Cameron wanted to leave it under as. And I think Tim Miller was like, no, we're going to leave it on a down note, and now we're going to see the struggle move forward. And I would have liked to prefer that version of the story because I would have been more intrigued by that. But this definitely was a picture by the, was it, what's the word, what's the phrase, is it by the numbers type of thing? And it really was, but it was a good film. And like you said, it's not a perfect film, but that's my thought. I mean, what did you think?
Same. You could kind of see where everything kind of from both aspects of where the movie was kind of trying to be the story, story-wise, either way. Like I said, I think Linda Hamilton steals the show. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger does an amazing job. It steals the scenes that he's in as well, especially during that drape scene. I thought it was hilarious. Don't you? It's all about the texture.
I love that line.
Texture, the color. It has to go with the room. You can't have it. It was fantastic. I loved it. Looking back, kind of thinking about some things, like the ending was kind of like cliched a little bit for me.
Yeah, it was.
Sacrifice herself. I was kind of like, oh, really? Do you really have to do that? But it kind of did set up that, she pretty much set her child, so to speak, back in time to save her. Which it was, I liked it and I didn't at the same time. But the way they got rid of the Rev 9 was really cool, especially with the T-800 kind of sacrificing himself, so to speak, and kind of ending it with for John. I think was really kind of
a nice little touch. I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's this is one of those franchises that this is like one of the weirdest situations for a franchise that are being like it's the series could have ended at 2, and because they pretty much established that we're done, we're set.
It's one of those. It's like one of those things. Like it's just like any other beloved franchise. Same thing with Alien. First one was great. James Cameron did the second one and did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah.
Then with the third one, it's kind of like you took everything from the first, you kind of threw it out and tried to redo a different thing. Like, it just they really could have done, I guess, more with the story.
Yeah.
And kind of help elevate. Okay, we have everyone coming back, and I think that was what we're kind of getting excited for, kind of seeing where it was going to go with the story.
Yeah. But well, so I mean, this has been one of the most interesting franchises that we've ever had in this industry. Well, for us fans out there, where you have 2 great films, and then you have really divisive, almost unanimously agreed upon films as being some of the worst in the franchise, understandably so. And then you have that one film that could turn the tide, and unfortunately, it came after 3 bad films, if you will. And we're right back to square one. And I'm thinking they should just brought it back, really scale it down. Don't go big, keep it small, and work on that. And if you make a good film on that smaller scale and it brings back $200-some million, you've already made more than your money back, and then some. And you have a reason for you to continue on the franchise. Now you can bring it up, but I think they messed up by going, let's go out with a bang and let's show them we can still do this here. And I'm thinking,
I hope they will build it up as well. But I mean, it is what it is. But what did you guys think? Did you guys love it? Do you guys hate it? Do you think it's the best thing since
Have you seen it?
Have you even seen it? Because we saw it. The funny thing is, we saw it like a couple of days after opening weekend. We did kind of get to see. We just weren't able to kind of bring this out there. Hopefully we have this come out in time for the DVD. So we let us know. Like, do you hate it? Do you love it? I mean, we liked it. I give it. What do you give it? Give it cheers.
I give it a good solid cheers. I mean, it's not a bad film. I mean, it's definitely worth a watch, I think, but it's not. It's definitely by the numbers type of movie. No doubt in my mind that it is. And for me to say that about a James Cameron controlled type of movie, something about that kind of seemed a little off to me. And I'm hoping that the Avatar sequels are not going to run into the same type of.
I think that had a lot to do with what T. Miller had. He had to work with what he was part of his vision and what his vision. I guess he tried to kind of put it together and it was a cohesive film, great pacing.
Yeah,
and it ended in a big, high, hopeful note. It was kind of cool to see Danny and Sarah Connor together at the end.
Yeah,
it kind of ended, like you said, on a sweet, good note, because we're going to see where we're eventually, if it leads anywhere.
Yeah, we'll see. But so those are our thoughts on the film here. So if you haven't done so, do us a favor, subscribe to this channel. Be sure to share and like. And again, comment down below and let us know what you all think here. And don't forget to, we also have a social media account here for NRW. We have a Twitter account here at the NRW, and also on Instagram at New Release Wednesdays here. And you can follow myself on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at RobMedina0585 and on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585. And my buddy from another nutty, you can follow him at Mr. David. Where can they follow you?
You can follow me on my Instagram and on my Twitter on David is Disaster, and you can look me up on Facebook as well. And like Rob said, we love doing these videos, and come back next time because we have more than this. We talk about movies, pop culture, comics, anything pop culture from the rest of the NRW crew, who do a fantastic job, by the way. So if you want more of your pop culture news, follow us on Facebook, follow us on social media, hit the like and subscribe button. And I guess that's, follow the annotations too, because usually we have stuff up here and usually over here for anything else that we might have, if I'm on that side of the video, unless Rob pointed. But hey, either way, like and subscribe, folks.
More on this
we have
quadrant.
And besides all that,
till next time, cheers.
Terminator.